Even after all these years, all these attacks, and all these dead, the West still keeps asking the same question after events like those of Monday night. Who would do such a thing? But as Douglas Murray says in this week's issue of The Spectator, terrorists are very clear about what they want. We just aren't listening. I'm now joined by Douglas, whose new book, The Strange Death of Europe, Immigration, Identity and Islam, has just been published, and Haras Rafiq, CEO of Quilliam. So Douglas, what drives someone to go into a crowd of young girls and detonate a bomb?
An ideology which, in his mind, would have explained everything. The meaning of life, the meaning of death, God, the universe, everything. And this, as I say in the piece, is one of the most, if not the most profound meeting points in our time, because somebody who believes in those things, and with his views, meets a group of young women out for a night hearing a pop singer. And the salient point, as it were, I want to bring across in the piece is people like the Manchester bomber say what they think all the time. The people who inspire them say what they think all the time, what they think about women, what they think about Muslims who don't agree with them, what they think about people who aren't Muslims. They say it all the time. But we keep asking this question, who would do such a thing, whilst keeping our fingers in our ears and not wanting to listen to the answer, deliberately not listening to the answer, even when we're told it all the time in the most bloody and brutal tones. And the example I give of that, separate to this, is something that it feels like it was a long time ago. It was only a month ago that there was the act of national mourning in Westminster Abbey when the Dean of Westminster stood up in relation to the Westminster terrorist attacks and said, what would drive somebody to drive a car into a crowd of strangers on Westminster Bridge and then kill a policeman? And the Dean of Westminster said, we may never know. And I say in the piece, we do know. We all knew at the time what Khalid Massoud, the Westminster attacker, was inspired by. If the Dean of Westminster had waited a few more days, he could have come out and said, actually, it turns out we've got the WhatsApp messages, and Khalid Massoud said to his mate he's doing it for jihad. But, of course, the Dean of Westminster would never get back up in the pulpit and say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, it turns out we do know. Nobody ever says that in our society. We just keep saying, why do they do it? And keep on being weepy mourners at our own funeral. And I think it's high time we change that.
Haras, why do you think people don't want to address this?
I think it's a combination of a number of things. I think it's political correctness. I think it's sometimes ignorance. I think it's sometimes fear of, if they are seen to be saying something that other people don't like, will they be deemed to be xenophobic or hate-based? But I just want to touch on this ignorant point again. It's something surreal. I heard something surreal on radio this morning. And I heard the Mayor of Manchester, Sheikh Andy Burnham, and I call him Sheikh Andy Burnham because he almost declared a fatwa this morning, as far as I'm concerned, and he behaved in the same way that ISIS do, in the way that they declare me and people like me as non-Muslims. And he said this morning, Abadi, the murderer, the terrorist who killed 22 people on Monday, my hometown, he declared him a non-Muslim. He said this is not Islam. How dare he say that? Who is he to say to me and to other Muslims and to the wider community that he is somebody who has the knowledge, has the expertise to behave like ISIS? Because that's what ISIS are doing. They're killing other Muslims for not being the right kind of Muslim. And to go back to Douglas's point, yes, it's an ideology. I've been doing this for 14 years and I'm sick of it. Enough is enough. For me, this is a game changer. You know, my sons work around the corner from the arena. I was there on Monday at 8 o'clock. My daughter could have been going to the concert. And this is you know, I've seen attacks in London, I've seen attacks around the world, and yes, I'm British and I feel for London, but this is my hometown. I'm sick of platitudes. I'm sick of pray for Manchester. We need to tackle this ideology head on, root it out, challenge it, put it to bed, because if we don't, all we're going to see is more and more attacks like this.
What needs to change then?
Well, the first thing is recognising the scale of the challenge, as Haras has just said, and has shown the scale of the ideological challenge, and to become serious about that. That's one of the points I try to make in this piece, that we really aren't serious about that. We just have this hermeneutic discussion, and There used to be a tendency after every attack to talk about control orders. Harris will remember this as well. You know, another group of people are killed somewhere, and all the politicians and everyone else go on and they say, well, what can we do to tighten up control orders? And sometimes the person doing it had been onto a control order. You know, but it was the thing. Now it's, what should we do in the prevent strategy X, Y, Z? To understand the scale of denial on this. I said this earlier today with Andrew Neil, that to understand the scale of this, consider this. Basically, apart from Quilliam and a couple of other Muslim organisations, I can count on 3 fingers probably, every single Muslim group in Britain has spent every year recently campaigning against the only counter-extremism policy that the British government has. Okay? The prevent policy I have all sorts of criticisms with, all of us do. But most voluble Muslim community groups in this country not only said they didn't like this bit of it or that bit of it, they said they didn't want such a policy. They don't want such a policy. And Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, when he was campaigning to be mayor of Manchester, campaigned partly to get Muslim votes by saying that he wanted prevent scrapped. Yeah. So that's the problem. It's all very well to do the morning pray for Manchester stuff, but I don't want to pray for Manchester. I just want fewer attacks, fewer people killed, fewer pop concerts having to have permanent security and so on around them. And the fact is that we're not serious about this, as shown by the fact that there is no pressure on Andy Burnham or on all of those groups that tour the UK saying we don't want any counter-extremism strategy. There's no pressure on these people. All they get is, as it were, the little uplift from joining in singing a rendition of Imagine, or what was it yesterday in Manchester, Everything's Gonna Be All Right. What if it isn't? What if everything ain't going to be all right?
Well, Lutz has got a very, very good point there in terms of the prevent strategy and this seriousness. You know, there was a recent poll that Policy Exchange conducted. More than half the Muslims in the country actually want a counter-extremism and a counter-terrorism strategy. So why are our politicians not serious? Why are these Muslim groups not serious in getting to grips with it? I'll tell you why. Because a lot of the people in Manchester, my home city, that have access to the politicians, that have access to the police, are part of the problem. They are homophobic. They are anti-Semitic. They create the otherization. They create the victim mentality. ISIS and Al-Qaeda don't radicalize anybody. What they do is tip people over the edge that these other community leaders, and I say that in inverted commas, these community groups who thrive off faith-based identity politics, they create all of this prism. They create this foundation, and ISIS go, thank you very much. And whatever the new flavour is, you know, in next year when ISIS or the year after collapses, there'll be something else unless we get to grips with it. There'll be another acronym. We are getting to a point now that the new normal, if the Mayor of London or whoever says, let's get used to it, the normal is that we've got these terrorist attacks, we've got to be in fear of our children, you know, worried about whether they'll be home after a concert or whether they'll be at home, coming home after a football match, etc. If this is the new normal, I don't want to live in a society like this, and nor should anybody else.
Douglas, one of the defining things about this attack was the misogyny within it. It's not the first deeply misogynistic thing we've seen. We've had the Rotherham, Rochdale and Oxfordshire grooming scandals. But do you think this attack will make people more aware of the misogyny within Islam?
It will make them more aware of it. It won't necessarily free them up to do anything about that. I hate to delve into the realm of the frivolous, but when this piece went out earlier with this very striking cover image by Moreland, Lily Allen immediately tweeted the Daily Mail story about Lexit, Brexit back. And that, I think, I don't want to take Lily Allen as indicative of anything other than her own idiocy, but that sort of for a while will continue to be the thing. Oh yeah, okay, there's a group of guys over there who will carry a nail bomb into a pop concert in the Manchester Arena on a Monday night. On the other hand, Sarah Vine once wrote a piece about the Prime Minister's legs in the Daily Mail, you know, so you've got to sort of weigh it up, haven't you? You know, take your chances, Daily Mail or the jihadist. I mean, that will, for a while longer, as I see it, continue to be a perfectly acceptable way for a sort of ordinary person to react to this. I think it's pathetic and pusillanimous, and I think the people who do it should be ashamed of themselves. But it's a sort of excuse, escape route for the time being.
Harris, in this week's issue of The Spectator, Jenny McCartney also suggests that Islamists are obsessed with controlling young women. Why is that?
Simply control. Islamists feel... Actually, it's not just Islamists. There are, within the text of Islamic scriptures, there are many passages, there are many things that historically people who are Muslims have used to control women. And, it's died down over time for some countries and less so in others. But Islamists really see women as second-class citizens. Islamists see them as servants. Islamists see them as people that are there, human beings that are there to do their bidding. The attack on Monday, the target wasn't necessarily selected off the back of misogyny. That probably had something to do with it. It was a tactical target. It was something that was low risk in terms of one person blowing himself up, creating maximum damage. They said they were going to do it. We knew they were going to do it. Manchester United Football Club have appointed a head of counter-terrorism. We know this is going to happen. We knew it was going to happen. Misogyny is a problem. Of course it is. And, people are getting to grips with that, and they will get to grips with it over time. ISIS really have highlighted for many people how big a problem it is, and they've actually done the rest of the world a bit of a favour by actually exposing some of the interpretations of text. You go to places like Saudi Arabia, women can't drive. Women can't go to work or go out of the house without permission from their mahram, from their guardian. That's not Islamism. That's Salafism. That's Wahhabism. That's theological. So there's been this problem both within certain interpretations of Islam and especially amongst Islamists.
Just finally, can we just talk about the security threat now? Because the attack in Westminster seemed far more basic than the one in Manchester, which seemed far more sophisticated. What should we make of that?
Well, as I say in the piece, it destroys one of the comforting things that we did have until this, which was the idea that it was not possible for British-based Islamists to create a viable explosive device of this kind. We've had also the consolation, thank goodness, to now, and hopefully for the future, the case that it's hard to get Kalashnikov rifles in the UK, and it is easier, of course, sadly, on the continent to do so. But we've had this idea that some of that couldn't happen here. The Manchester Arena attack shows that it is possible. There are people who can do that, and that is a very serious concern. I said after the Westminster attack, in a way, the one consolation we had from it was that this showed people who are running out of options, using a car and a knife. If that isn't the case, and there are more people out there who can create bombs of this kind, then we've got a problem ahead.
But for me, some things that I've learned from this is that people are still living in denial, as Douglas mentioned. Abadi, the suicide bomber, comes from a family with connections to Islamist organisations. The Libyan Islamic Fighting Group comes from an environment and an atmosphere where Islamism has been in his upbringing. There have been people who've spotted him. There was an imam at the mosque where he used to go and used to work, who wrote a piece in The Guardian, I think it was today, saying that he'd noticed that when the imam had given a sermon about Al-Qaeda, that Abadi reacted in a bad way. Well, why tell us now? Why didn't you do something about it then? There is no such thing as a lone wolf. There is no such thing as somebody who suddenly goes online and decides that he or she wants to become a jihadist. People know, people observe, people see things. This is also an opportunity for the community. And by the way, you don't have to be Muslim to challenge this. Just as you don't have to be gay to challenge homophobia, you can be straight and challenge homophobia. Just as you don't have to be black to challenge apartheid in the past. If you are non-Muslim or if you're Muslim, I don't care. We're British. We have a duty and a right now to step up and become champions in our societies and challenge these people. You see something, do something about it. That's the point we need to get to.
If I may add one thing to that, wholly endorse, of course, what Harris just said. But there is a deep worry. It's one of the things I address in my book. There's a deep worry at the moment about the public and the political class thinking two different things. I very much worry about this in relation to this attack. The political class will be talking about the prevent strategy and so on, but the public will, I think, rightly be wondering, okay, we took this couple in as asylum seekers fleeing Gaddafi's Libya, and how did we get repaid by their son going to Manchester Arena last Monday evening? And you see, this now is going to the root of a very big underlying bubbling problem across our whole continent, which is this fear. What if this is the future? What if even our acts of goodness get repaid in this way? And I'm very worried that if politicians do not start to look further than just the day-to-day on this, we've got a problem coming.
That was Douglas Murray in Harris.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.